All right, my fellow basketball sickos and aficionados, my fellow hoop heads, it's time to recap what is an insane day two of the SEC men's basketball tournament. It is very late. It is 2 o'clock local time here in Nashville. It is 3 o'clock back home on the Eastern time zone in South Carolina, where 107.5 the game is, and our listening audience. And look, this is probably the wildest conference basketball or conference tournament basketball day in a long time. The SEC started off today with a 3-point shot to win a game for Ole Miss with less than 5 seconds left. A double overtime game between Texas and Texas A&M, and those were not even the best finishes of the day. Really, there's no better way to start this right now than talking about the game that I just left and the press conference that I just left. And that was Kentucky-Oklahoma. This was absolute blockbuster matchup. I loved the matchup last night. Whenever Oklahoma took down Georgia and Oklahoma really figured out a lot of stuff on offense, I figured that this was going to be a very hotly contested matchup. I figured that with their offense and the Kentucky's offensive firepower, we would see a high-scoring game. We would see a lot of action. We would have a game that probably ended in the 80s, and that's the good stuff, right? This is the last game of the night. It's the one I got to start with. But before I dig into that, got to let you know, as always, our show and our coverage here in Nashville brought to you by my friends over at Columbia Craft and Peak Drift. They are two award-winning brands producing two high-quality brands that are producing award-winning craft beer in South Carolina. Forgive me if I stumble on speech. It's not because I've drank a lot of these Columbia Craft famously hop IPAs. I do like drinking them, but it has been a wall-to-wall day of basketball coverage. And man, we got to wrap this up. We got to wrap up day two because we're coming to grips with some of the craziest basketball I think a lot of us have ever seen in one day's stretch. We'll start with Kentucky. Oh, hit my microphone. We'll start with Kentucky and Oklahoma because that one's just the freshest on my mind. An incredible back-and-forth game. Kentucky gets out to an 8-0 start, and Bridgestone Arena, which is essentially Rupp South, is just rocking, right? And the Kentucky's offense is humming. Oklahoma fights their way back in. Jeremiah Fears has a really solid game, a non-efficient shooting game. I mean, if anything, he kind of shot him out of a few possessions. But he was able to get a lot of scoring done, facilitating a lot of offense. I mean, he figured out late in the first half that really nobody on Kentucky's team, especially when Lamont Butler went out, who didn't return to the game. He definitely re-aggravated a shoulder injury. That's kept him out of a lot of games this year. Once they were able to exploit those mismatches in the first half, Fears got to the rim at will. He got to the rim at will. He's able to draw extra defenders, two to the ball, be able to kick out. And that's the one thing that Oklahoma did really well against Georgia just last night was whenever they got two to the ball, Fears was able to find open shooters. And they have a lot of really good corner three-point shooters. And this is a really good three-point shooting team in Oklahoma. It's one of the reasons why I didn't like the matchup for Kentucky, and I thought Oklahoma would pull the upset off. And it was a back-and-forth affair. We get into the second half, and we got about 5 minutes left, and Kentucky's up by about 12, and that's when it felt over. That was when it first felt over to me. I'm like, okay, it's a 12-point game. Oklahoma's gone cold from the field. This is where things start to cruise, right? This is where it's like, all right, let's get this thing over with. We can get to the press conference. We can get out of here. We can go ahead and knock out, this live stream, and I can go to bed. But that was not the case. Oklahoma did not let that be the case. And in this game too, in the 5 minutes, it's still a pretty commanding Kentucky lead. We get to about 1:20 left, and Jeremiah Fears takes his defender off the dribble. Kind of gets away a little bit of a push-off on Brandon Garrison, but gets fouled, makes the basket, hits the free throw. So now it's a 7-point game, yada, 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 right? A steal happens. Kobe Elba steals an inbounds pass. They get a layup. They cut down to 5. Well, Oklahoma ends up getting 3 steals in the final minute of the game, like trapping and getting steals, forcing Kentucky turnovers, getting 3 steals and converting those into points. And at the last steal, which an absolutely terrible possession for the Kentucky offense where they get the ball at half court and really just fall apart. for lack of better terms, they peed the bed. And Jeremiah Fears gets a big steal. He pounds the air out of the rock at the top of the key. He gets to the lane, left hand off the window, scores with 5 seconds left. And for the first time, I would say that entire second half, Oklahoma had the lead for 5.6 seconds. And then Otega-Oweh happened. The rest is history. Otega-Oweh takes the inbounds pass at about the opposite free throw line, and in 5.6 seconds, only needed 5.1 of them to get to the opposite baseline, hit a runner, and send Kentucky home. A remarkable basketball game. The half-court heave was nowhere near close to being good. Kentucky survives, and this is one of those games, too, where you're watching this in utter disbelief that we even got to this point. It should have never gotten to this point. When you're up double digits with a minute and a half left, that should be it. That should be ball game. Credit Oklahoma to making this a game, to never giving up, and whenever it can be pretty easy to just start fouling, to kind of mentally move on, accept a loss, move on. But instead of fouling, Porter Moser after the game said that he wanted to foul once they got past half court. The trap until you get to half court, then maybe start fouling, then you can prolong the game. Oklahoma didn't need to. Kentucky even got the ball past half court on 2 of those steals, but the trap was so aggressive that it forced Kentucky to turn the ball over. And this is kind of highlighting a larger issue with Kentucky right now, is that with Lamont Butler out, you don't have a lot of great options at point guard. Lamont Butler only played 8 minutes tonight, left because of the injury, and you had to resort to a lot of Colin Chandler at the point guard position. You had Travis Perry at the point guard position, and they didn't play a ton of minutes. Chandler did. He ended up getting 22, but Travis Perry only played about 6. That was a little bit of an issue. Even though Kentucky, I think, is unique in the way that they run a lot of offense through their bigs. Mari Williams, the Drexel transfer, I think is a maestro at running zoom action. And those are hard actions to guard, right? They're always going to be hard actions to guard. And they make you stay on your toes as an off-ball defender. And they make you work. You're running around a ton of screens. You're fighting over dribble handoffs. Oklahoma had a lot of issue with that, even without, a true point guard. But in a situation in which you need someone to be able to handle the ball and take care of it and just draw the foul. If you're Kentucky, all you need to do in that last minute is just draw the foul. Inbound the ball cleanly, take care of it past half court to avoid the 10-second call, draw the foul, get to the line, knock down your free throws, and then you take care of business. You walk out of Bridgestone Arena, game over. But Oklahoma aggressively trapped, deflecting the passes to, making sure that Kentucky wasn't going to just inbound the ball easily and get fouled and end it. That was a lot of toughness that I saw from that Oklahoma team, to be able to get it into contention and not even to speak about, getting a lead with 5 seconds left, right? This game felt over. Once we got to the 3.5-minute mark, it felt done. The building, which is, again, Rupp down south, it was raucous. They're standing up. The Go Big Blue chants are ubiquitous across the arena. And Oklahoma could have easily folded. They could have easily folded and packed their bags and head home. But they didn't. They silenced that crowd. I'm telling you, the crowd, whenever Jeremiah Fears put the ball on the deck and with his left hand scored the layup, stunned disbelief. Kentucky then called a timeout to set up their play, which eventually was the Otega-Oweh game winner. And you're sitting in there, and I'm looking around, and the surrender cobras are all over the place, right? So many surrender cobras, so many WTFs being said by people that are sitting near where I was. Obviously the entire arena, with the small exception of the little chunk of Oklahoma fans that were behind the Oklahoma bench, the whole place decked out in blue. The entire arena had this feeling of what just happened. Like everybody simultaneously got hit with a brick and was just completely hazed. There was a lot of confusion as to just trying to process what the hell went on to be able to lose your 10-point lead that you had with 1:20 left, only to find yourself down by 1 with 5 seconds left. It was a 19-6 run. Porter Moser said it was a 19-6 run that Oklahoma went on in the last couple of minutes of that game, especially when Kentucky went up 12. So Kentucky went up 12, and then since they went up 12, it was a 19-6 run. before Otega-Oweh's final shot. That's remarkable. And that's incredibly gutsy. I've been a guy all year, not very high on Oklahoma, even kind of discounted their resume a little bit and thought they should have been maybe a little bubblier as a bubble team than what they were, just because the SEC record wasn't fantastic. But as we know, this league is incredibly difficult, and it will beat you up. And this is Oklahoma's second loss to Kentucky, and losing in the exact same fashion. Because for those who don't remember, on February 26th in Norman, Otega-Oweh hit a layup with about 6 seconds left, and then Jeremiah Fears tried to take it coast to coast in a very similar way that Otega-Oweh did in this Oklahoma game, misses the shot. Hard to guard. Mark Pope in the presser after the game tonight mentioned the same thing, that when it came to the play to get Otega-Oweh downhill, it was very similar to what Oklahoma did to them to try to get a last shot. And Mark Pope said he kind of, he realized, how hard it is when an excellent scoring guard like an Otega-Oweh or a Jeremiah Fears gets downhill, how hard it can be to stop their momentum and get a stop on defense. So they took the same play. And what Porter Moser said for Oklahoma was they set up as a 1-2-2, and they were going to trap. They were going to trap the corner. When you watch the replay of Otega-Oweh's game winner, he gets to half court, and you see one Oklahoma defender, which is the one in the 1-2-2, and the other one, who is the one in charge of cutting off the sideline. We're supposed to trap. There's just a meet on him in the middle and trap. Otega-Oweh straight up just wins the foot race, right? He runs past that first defender. He beats the other defender to that spot, and by the time he wins that foot race, there is no ability to trap. And there's only one defender back, who is one of the two on the back end of that defense, that has to meet him over and force a missed shot. And even that defender was not there in time. Otega-Oweh had the angle. He had the angle towards the baseline and had a really clear look. And defensively, I think that was kind of inexcusable for Oklahoma. I respect the idea to go 1-2-2 and trap. I think that's a fine idea by Oklahoma. The execution was atrocious. The execution could not have been worse, because you had a head start to that spot on the floor where you knew Oweh was going. Moser, after the game, even said as much. We knew Oweh was getting the ball. We knew he was going to get downhill. This was our way to try to combat him going downhill. So if you know that, and you got to be at that spot to cut off that angle, how the hell are you not cutting off that angle? Oweh wins the foot race, gets to the basket, wins the game. There should never be in a scenario in college basketball or any level of basketball where there's 5 seconds left, you're inbounding underneath your own basket, and you're able to, without any resistance, get a shot on the baseline. That should never happen. So as great as a shot as that was from Otega-Oweh, and as great of an athletic feat it was to get to that spot, Oklahoma had a little bit of a choke job on their own. It's hard to call a team like a choke artist or choking anything, when one guy makes a spectacular play at the basket and wins the game. I understand Oklahoma had a fantastic run to get it to that spot, and I tip my cap to them. That's hard, and that takes a lot of guts, and it takes a lot of resilience to be able to find yourself back in that position when the game was seemingly over. Hats off to you. But, man, they're going to want that 5 seconds back, and they're going to want they would have wanted another shot to keep Otega-Oweh from just winning that foot race to the basket. Essentially, that's what he did. He won a foot race to the basket, and credit to him. He's an amazing athlete. He had 27 points tonight on 8 of 14 shooting. He was 2 of 3 from 3. Kobe Brea was the only other Wildcat above 20. He had 22 on 8 of 12 shooting, 4 of 7. That guy's a sniper, man. Best shooter in college basketball, bar none. And even without Jackson Robinson, Kirk Kriisa, who they've been out with, he's been out most of the year. And now Lamont Butler, who has seemingly re-aggravated that shoulder injury. It didn't sound optimistic in the post-game press conference from Mark Pope that they're going to get him back. He didn't confirm nor deny. They're going to do some imaging. They're going to do some looks, and they're going to evaluate him further. But based on body language and tone and word choice, it didn't seem likely that Lamont Butler's back. That's me interpreting how Mark Pope answered the question, not just what he answered it with. You could tell he is genuinely upset for Lamont Butler that he might be missing the NCAA tournament. He might. It would be a big loss for them because Kentucky defensively, that's their fatal flaw. They're elite on offense. They are prone to giving up massive scoring runs on defense, and they don't gamble enough on that end of the floor to create turnovers. They're very low in turnover rate on defense. Lamont Butler is the best on-ball defender. I didn't think whenever he left the game, I didn't think they would have anybody able to stop Jeremiah Fears. Now Fears got his. He did score 28 points. Took 22 shots to do it. Was only 2 of 11 from 3, but he was able to get to the line 7 times. He was able to get 5 assists and only turn the ball over once. Kentucky's not a team to really put a lot of pressure on the ball. Fears did what Fears does. High volume shooting, but can get buckets when you need him to. Can distribute, but he turned the turnover battle down, or the turnover issue that he's had at times this year, turned it down. It just wasn't enough. Again, final score, Kentucky 85, Oklahoma 84. They move on to play Alabama in the nightcap tomorrow night, which hopefully does not run as later as it did tonight. We'll start with the first game of the day. This was an all-time classic. Arkansas and Ole Miss. Ole Miss, really, it boiled down to this. We had a tie game. Trevin Brazil's at the free throw line, and he's got a chance to take a 2-point lead with, I'm trying to think how much. I'm going the play-by-play, and just to double-check how much time was left. There was 7 seconds left. Okay, so Malik Dia fouls Trevin Brazil. He's got a chance to shoot 2 free throws, make 2 free throws, so he can go up 2 with 7 seconds left, and then force Ole Miss to have to shoot a 3 to win, or score a 2 to send it to overtime. Well, he misses both unintentionally. I know we had a very interesting game yesterday with our beloved Gamecocks, who lost to Arkansas, and the very bizarre request of John Calipari to make John L. Davis miss a free throw with up 3 with only a couple seconds left. It's still dumb. It makes no sense. Well, this time Arkansas missed both free throws unintentionally. Sean Padula gets the ball, hits a 3-pointer with just seconds left. Ole Miss wins 83-80, and a team that is fundamentally sound, doesn't beat themselves, did a really great job of doing that tonight or today. That was the first game of the day, and making sure that they didn't give up too many baskets in transition from Arkansas, which is what they do really well to keep them back in this game. Thank you to Patrick Fisher, who's commenting right now. I know you have to be a fellow basketball sicko to chime in this late. I appreciate you, sir. My hat is off to you. So I'll read a couple of your comments here. It says, if Carolina gets in the NIT, do we host a first-round game or go on the road? That's a really good question, because it's going to be dependent on where they're seated in the NIT. My inclination would be that it's going to be on the road because you are 12-20. So if I'm giving auto bids and I'm accepting teams that had losing seasons, I would seed them lower. Even if you have, let's say UC San Diego. Let's say UC San Diego doesn't win the Big West tournament and they are excluded from the NCAA tournament. They probably have a metric score that the NIT uses, which I can't explain. Just quite frankly, never really cared enough to figure out how the NIT comes up with a metric to determine which teams are worthy for their event. But if you look at all the resumes and just field a bracket, South Carolina has to be a really low seed in it. Just you're 8 games below 500. So I have a feeling they'd go on the road. I saw a couple weeks ago somebody had an NIT bracketology, which is a hell of a gig if you can get it, I guess, but had an NIT bracketology that had South Carolina hosting Rutgers. Now, in the perfect world, that would rule, because then you get Colin Murray Boyles against Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper. Those are 3 guys that are probably going to be drafted in the top 15. Harper and Bailey are going to be in the top 3 more than likely. That would be a really fun game, but there's no guarantee that if Rutgers and South Carolina played in the NIT that you get participation from those 3 players if they don't plan on playing next season in school. And then the other comment from Patrick says, this year's tournament is definitely different when ESPN has the #1 team and Jay Billis being at the tournament instead of the ACC tournament in Charlotte. That's a really good observation, Patrick, because I thought the same thing. Dan Schulman and Jay Billis, that's the A-team crew, man. That's ESPN's A-team crew. And they got those dudes here for the week. They ain't going nowhere. They were here yesterday on day 1. They were here for day 2. They're going to do the first 2 games tomorrow again as well. They'll do semifinal Saturday, and I guarantee you we will see them on the television on Sunday for the championship. that is a really good indicator of how big this thing is. I think it's commonly accepted right now in the world of college basketball that this SEC tournament is the most loaded conference tournament field in modern college basketball history. And one of the reasons we can say modern college basketball history, I mean, we can fight and argue about maybe how good the Big East was in the mid-'80s. I can't argue with you, wasn't alive, but I know of the names and the coaches and what the kids would say, aura, was around that league. And I respect it and I love it. But since 1997, when Ken Pomeroy decided to make a website dedicated to quantifying everything that we hold dear in college basketball, to be able to have discussions like this and be able to do it factually, this is the best conference of all time in terms of just net rating. In terms of overall conference rating, this is the best one. And it is by a decent bit. And the other evidence that we have that possibly proves this point true is that there's a really good chance. I don't say really good chance. Time out. Let's reverse that. There is a reasonable chance the Southeastern Conference gets 14 teams. And that's because Texas winning today. We'll go over that one real quick too. Texas in double overtime beats Texas A&M. Did an amazing job. My biggest takeaway there was in the first half, Texas did a phenomenal job of keeping A&M off of the glass. That's the key to beating A&M. They're not going to shoot you out of the gym. They're not going to be high explosive on offense without the assistance of the offensive rebounders and drawing fouls while they're at it and getting to the free throw line. Texas with that win, I still don't think they're in. And a win against A&M's massive. I'm not discrediting that, and they should be thrilled with what they did today. They should rest up. They should not do a shoot around or anything tomorrow. They should not do anything physical until it's time to walk into the arena and play the game, because they have played 50, no, more than that. I'm doing my math is really wrong. 90 minutes of basketball, 90 minutes of basketball in the last day and a half. That's a lot of basketball. Now you got to play Tennessee, which is the #1 defense in the country, and you're doing so with Tennessee at almost a full week's rest. And you've played 2 games in the last 2 days. That's a daunting challenge. I will say if Texas beats Tennessee tomorrow in the second game, then we have chaos, especially if Duke beats North Carolina. If Duke beats North Carolina tomorrow, I think that will essentially end North Carolina's hopes of getting an at-large bid in the NCAA tournament, because then they will have ended their season in conference tournament with one single solitary quad 1 win. Now, Texas has 6. The thing with Texas, and the reason why they don't have a resume that a lot of people see stacks up in the NCAA tournament, is the number of losses. And at some point, that has to matter, right? You look at Texas, they don't have a fantastic net rating. They're 41. They have a worse net rating than Ohio State, who is not going to make the NCAA tournament. They have a worse net rating than the Mountain West leader in Utah State. They have a worse net rating by, 5 spots than North Carolina. UC San Diego's got a better net rating. VCU has a better net rating. Baylor has a better net rating. So the net ranking that they have isn't very good. They also have 5 losses outside of the quad 1. They're actually have a losing record in quad 2 games. And that's one thing, and not a lot of these bubble teams have, as a straight up losing record in quad 2 games. And when I look at the team sheet here on WarrenNolan.com, a very, very handy tool, you look at those quad 2 losses. A home loss against Connecticut, which seems ridiculous because they're the 2-time defending champion. You almost should be punished for losing that game against Connecticut. But Connecticut and their net ranking is not as good as it was when they won the national title the last 2 years. This is not the same Connecticut team. They are low enough to where if you lose to them at home, which you just got to be outside the top 30, then it counts as a quad 2 loss. Losing to Georgia at home was a quad 2 loss. Losing to Arkansas at home was a quad 2 loss. The recent loss to Oklahoma at home was a quad 2 loss. They also lost a neutral site game to St. Joseph's out of the A-10. They also lost a game at, you guessed it, Colonial Life Arena against South Carolina to give South Carolina their first conference win of the season. And they got killed in that fashion too. And speaking of getting killed, Well, no, this game they beat. They did beat St. Joseph's. I'm delirious right now. St. Joseph, yeah, they beat St. Joseph's by 9 and beat LSU. All the others are L's, but that's a losing record in Quad 2. And that's my thing with Texas. It's my big hang up. It's the reason why I still need to see them get to Sunday. You have 5 Quad 2 losses, a losing record in Quadrant 2. How do you expect me to put that team in? If you have almost as many Quad 2 losses as you have Quad 1 wins, you're not in great shape. You're not in great shape at all. There was respect to the win today because that was gutsy. A double overtime win against that Texas A&M team, a team that is the best offensive rebound team in the country, a team that's one of the most physical defensive teams in the country, is absolutely wild. That's a great win, especially considering how Texas and Texas A&M view each other. They hate each other. Epic rivalry, right? And for the first time, they play each other in an SEC tournament, and they get a lot of breaks to go their way. Anderson Garcia fouls out. Solomon Washington fouls out. Manny Obaseki fouls out after hitting a big 3 early in the game. The biggest faux pas in this one, though, moving our focus directly to this game, is Buzz Williams calling a 3-pointer late in the game with less than a minute left, where Wade Taylor knocks down a triple. That made it about a 5-point game with a minute left. That would have essentially sealed it, barring anything crazy, barring anything like we saw in the Oklahoma-Kentucky game. That should have sealed it. But as Wade Taylor's shooting the ball, Buzz Williams calls a timeout. The 3 doesn't go in. He draws up a play that doesn't get you a good shot at all. It was a terrible shot selection. Did not love the play design out of the timeout. And it results in a missed shot in Texas getting the ball. Texas made the most of it. Tremont Mark hit a massive 3 in the game before fouling out. Jordan Pope had 2 great offensive possessions late in the game. And the thing about Texas, though, that I like about saying the sentence I just said, where Tremont Mark hits a big 3, Jordan Pope got into the lane and made big plays, including one big shot with some perfect English on the ball, if you will, to get it to bounce in, is that those are 2 guys that are not named Trey Johnson that you can rely upon to score at late in the game and win. All the defenses that have played Texas this year really just converge on Trey Johnson. They know it's Trey Johnson's show. He's got a high usage rating, and Texas relies a lot on that freshman because that freshman can score the bleeping rock, man. That freshman can score at will, and I think he is the best available scoring player in terms of a player who's just a raw scorer in the NBA draft, the upcoming draft. I mean, that's why he's going to be a top 5, 6 pick maybe. But they've relied on him way too much. And sometimes I think Trey Johnson will have largely productive games from a scoring standpoint and it be a net negative on the team just because the ball sticks. It doesn't move around as much. You're not challenging a defense. You're not stressing an opposing defense. And sometimes when they play defense well, even a tough shot maker will miss tough shots because opposing defenses make you miss shots. Sometimes the defense will make you miss shots, and that's happened a lot for Trey Johnson this year. He's turned into a volume shooter. But when he's on, and he's one of the best players in the sport, one of the best freshmen in the sport, definitely not named Cooper Flagg. So Texas was able to get a big win. We break down that box score. I find this one, by the numbers to be very interesting. Trey Johnson had 20 points, but on 21 shots. He was, again, another high-volume shooter, but he's 4 of 9 from 3, and that was where he was really effective, was the 3-point shot. But listen to the other contributions that you got. Kendall Weaver off the bench gave Texas 10. That's massive. That is huge that they get bench scoring. This is not a team that's got bench scoring or reliable bench scoring all season long. Now, better late than never, yes, but better or never late is better, to use a song quote. Tremont Mark gave you 15. Arthur Kaluma gave you 12. And that's the player that I have seen the most on this Texas team, given his previous stops in his career at Creighton and Kansas State, where he is a 3-level scorer. He's good at putting the ball on the deck, great athleticism. I don't know why it hasn't been able to be a larger part of this Texas offense. Because I remember when Texas picked him up in the transfer portal last year, I had high expectations that he was going to be a focal point of this offense, even with Trey Johnson in the lineup. But today, he was very efficient. 12 points, 7 rebounds on 5 of 9 shooting. Jordan Pope, like I mentioned, he had a couple of really big baskets, including a floater in the lane that helped seal the deal Late in the second overtime, he finished with 13. The interesting one, though, Caden Shedrick, former Virginia center. Shedrick has struggled at times to make free throws. And if you guys remember here, the South Carolina-Texas game where Texas tried to mount a little bit of a comeback, South Carolina dominated for large stretches of that game. Shedrick had a couple opportunities at the line and missed a lot of them, bricked a lot of free throws, and I think cost them a chance at least making a run in that game against South Carolina, right? I don't blame him for costing them the game, but I blame him for costing or killing, I guess, a rally that they could have had later on in that contest. But once again, the final score on that one through 2 overtimes, Texas 94, Texas A&M 89. So A&M here for a good time, not a long time. Wade Taylor breaks the record for most points in a career in an SEC tournament. He did so very inefficiently today. He had 29 points, so you could be like, wow, Elijah Wade Taylor had a really good game. Get off his back. No. 5 of 18 from the field, 2 of 7. But what he did do really well, and what kept A&M in this game, and what's kept A&M in a lot of games this year, is his ability to get to the free throw line. He was 17 of 18 from the free throw line. 18 free throws. At one point in second overtime, the broadcast said he had 13 drawn fouls. That's remarkable. And when your shot's not falling from the field, yeah, it's good if you get as many free throws as you get field goal attempts, especially when you're a high-volume shooter. That kept A&M in this game, was his ability to get to the line. And in the second half, where A&M finally started offensive rebounding a little bit, a team that, mind you, grabs 42% of their misses during the season, in the first half against Texas, only grabbed 16% of them, which is why Texas was able to leave the first half with the lead. That's why they were up 33-27 at halftime. But A&M was able to ramp up the offensive rebounding efforts, and that is why you saw them creep back into the game. Specifically, I mean, Henry Coleman, so the team, mind you, A&M had 3 offensive rebounds in the first half. Henry Coleman had 8 offensive rebounds for the entire game, right? That's what this team does. Pharrell Payne had 3. Anderson Garcia, who I think is one of the best role players in college basketball, had 4. They got themselves back in it because they stuck to what Texas A&M Aggie basketball is: offensive rebounding, putbacks, draw fouls, get to the line. But it was too little too late. Went to 2 overtimes. 1 overtime was not enough. Texas escapes, and if I'm a prognosticator, which I will pretend to be in this broadcast, it's kind of part of my job, Texas is not in the tournament right now. I still firmly believe they need to get to at least Saturday. I'm willing to cave on that because at the beginning of the year, I said beginning of the week, I said Texas needs to get to Sunday to be in the NCAA tournament. Given how weak the bubble is, given the possibility that North Carolina is going to lose to Duke, now no Cooper Flagg, no Malik Brown, there's a chance they win. But if they lose, I think that eliminates North Carolina, opens the door for Texas. They have to beat Tennessee tomorrow. And then maybe there's some grace if Texas picks up their 15th loss of the season to Auburn. Maybe. Might get the benefit of the doubt, especially if the game before that was a win against a potential 1 seed Tennessee team. You're able to beat Tennessee. That is a crowning achievement on a resume. A win against Tennessee, given their high net ranking and where they've been in the polls all season long, not just the polls, but on KenPom, Torvik. Anywhere you get those advanced analytics, Tennessee's always at the top. Tennessee's always at the top, especially defensively. That's the number 1 defense in the country. So if they're able to beat Tennessee tomorrow and North Carolina loses to Duke and there's no bid thief out of the Mountain West, meaning you're going to need New Mexico to win the Mountain West, because if Boise State wins the Mountain West, that's a bubble team. They will leapfrog you, obviously. And New Mexico, as a at-large, probably leapfrogs you as well. Like, Boise State winning the Mountain West would be a legitimate bid thief thing here, right? They would be a legitimate bid thief, and that would keep Texas and North Carolina out. But assuming North Carolina loses to Duke, if they do, and Texas beats Tennessee, then I can concede on the point of Texas getting into the tournament to win by winning 3 games in 3 days. And many of those games, they are against teams that beat them. So that would be a pretty significant accomplishment for Texas. But as of right now, as where I sit late on a Friday morning, or late on a Thursday night / Friday morning, they're not in. Still got to do the impossible. Not the impossible. It's possible. Still got to do what's really hard, and that is to beat Tennessee tomorrow. A little more on Ole Miss and Arkansas before we wrap things up here. Well, actually, I haven't even mentioned the Missouri game, but Arkansas, Sean Padula, 0 for 6 from 3. This is the note, right? And what's crazy is that we had this amazing finish between Ole Miss and Arkansas where Padula hits a shot in the final seconds to beat Arkansas. Billy Richmond almost hits a half-court shot at the buzzer to tie it, send it to overtime. As crazy as that ending was, and as great as a game as that was the third best game today. So it gets buried in the headlines a little bit. But Malik Dia was awesome in the first half of this game. He ended up finishing with 19 on 8 shots, 7 of 8. Padula wasn't shooting very well, and sometimes that's basketball. Like today we had 2 goat to hero moments, right? Where for Sean Padula, he was 0 for 6 from 3. He was 3 for 11 from the field. He was not playing his best game. He had a 2 to 4 assist to turnover ratio. This is an Ole Miss team that thrives on dominating assist to turnover ratio. Ole Miss had a negative assist to turnover ratio today, which is credit to Arkansas's defense and the improvement that Arkansas's defense has made throughout the year. But in this game, Ole Miss, who is one of the best at forcing turnovers and then not turning it over, lost that battle. Very rarely do they lose that battle, but they lost it today. Padula lost it individually and did not shoot very well. But when it came time to winning time, he caught the ball in perfect stride, in perfect rhythm, knocked down the shot, won the game. Massive win for Ole Miss, an exciting win for Ole Miss. And Sean Padula goes from having a very disappointing game and a potential one-and-done trip to Nashville for Ole Miss. He hits the 3. Arkansas goes home. They get to move on to play Auburn. That game is going to be tomorrow at 1 Eastern. Number 1 seed Auburn versus 8 seed Ole Miss. And then after that will be the Texas-Tennessee game. And then we'll have a break. Then Florida and Missouri will play at 7. And you're like, Elijah, we haven't talked about Missouri yet. We'll run through this one really quick. And this was a good game, too. It ended up being a 12-point game. Missouri ended up winning 85-73. It ended up being a much better game than that final score indicates. It was back and forth. Mississippi State, straight up, the difference in this game was there were multiple runs, or multiple droughts, I should say. I don't even say runs. Missouri scored when they needed to, and they scored consistently throughout the game. And Tamar Bates was fantastic, 25 points. Tony Perkins had a Tony Perkins game, right? 20 points on efficient scoring, grabbed 7 boards, dropped 4 dimes too. So in the two, when you're leading scores, dishes out 4 assists, the offense is humming along, right? And those two really carried the torch tonight, especially considering Mark Mitchell got hurt. And Mark Mitchell, I would say the consensus best player on this Missouri team, the Duke transfer, who has made a fantastic leap. I love watching Mark Mitchell play. As a scorer, a true scorer of the basketball, I think he's made a really good leap this year. But he got hurt 12 minutes into the game, had to leave the game early, and did not return. Dennis Gates said in the press conference that he talked to Dennis Gates, Mark Mitchell did, about the possibility of returning, and Mark Mitchell told him that he didn't want to be a liability. That's paraphrasing. It's not the word, I guess the specific words, but Mark Mitchell didn't want to be a liability. He didn't want to take down his team's performance and thought it might be better for the team if he stays out, which takes maturity. And he wasn't feeling 100%, so he kept himself out of the game. We'll see if he's good enough tomorrow. He's got a little bit of time to recover before 7 o'clock when Missouri takes on Florida, which should be a fantastic game, by the way. Missouri took care of business on offense. Mississippi State just did not. And that's kind of State's problem at times. The last couple of years, it's been a huge problem. But this is the first year since Chris Jans has taken over that they have a higher ranking in the country on offensive efficiency compared to defensive efficiency. Don't get me wrong. This is still a unit that guards very well. It's still very aggressive on ball screens. They're still very good at trapping the short corner and forcing turnovers. And they do that a lot. But Mississippi State shot themselves out of the game today, and Josh Hubbard was kind of part of that. Like Josh Hubbard, 3 of 14 from 3, 8 of 22 from the field. And Missouri did a really good job of making him hit tough shots. When Josh Hubbard is an efficient scorer, Mississippi State is a very hard team to beat. That's a legitimate top 20 team in the country when he's doing that. When he's not, and they're not offensive rebounding a ton. Now, they did well tonight, grabbed 14 offensive boards compared to Missouri's 9, so they were able to create more possessions that way. They shot 11 more shots than Missouri did. but the three-point line killed them. They were 6 of 30 from three tonight, and that's not going to get it done. RJ Melendez was 1 of 7. Again, Josh Hubbard was 3 of 14. Riley Kugel, a guy who shoots a decent amount of threes for this team, was 0 for 3. Really, Sean Jones was the only efficient three-point shooter. He hit 2 of his 3. Claudel Harris, a guy who in last night's game and their win against LSU, was an efficient shooter. He was limited to no points and was 0 for 3 on his attempts. Mississippi State hit 2 big droughts during the game where they just could not score. And that's both credit to Missouri's defense, who clamped down and took over when the situation called for it. And it's also an indictment on what this Mississippi State offense is. It can be really streaky because Josh Hubbard's a really streaky scorer. And this team kind of comes and goes as Josh Hubbard takes them. When Josh Hubbard's shooting efficiently and shooting a lot and creating shots, the team's really good. But when he's shooting 3 of 14 from 3, it can be really difficult. And teams not named Alabama this year have been really aggressive when it comes to guarding him. They blitz a lot of ball screens. They try to get the ball in his hands as quickly as possible. That doesn't completely take him out of the game because he will shoot a lot of shots. Tonight, I thought Missouri did a fantastic job of blitzing every ball screen he was involved in and pushing him back further from the three-point line and forcing him to get rid of the ball. That made a huge difference, especially in the second half. When Mississippi State needs a quick bucket, sometimes they will use a dribble handoff or a ball screen for Hubbard just to free him up with just enough space to get a shot off. Missouri closed those gaps really well tonight. And that's a credit to Aiden Shaw, who came in and gave them really good minutes defensively. It's a credit to Tamar Bates, who, along with his 25 points, played fantastic on-ball defense and stuck with Hubbard a lot. I mean, and Tony Perkins, the point guard on this team, he's a do-it-all guy, was an Iowa transfer, did a fantastic job running around the perimeter, following Josh Hubbard around. So an all-around great performance for Missouri. Fantastic win. The only game today that was decided by double figures. It was the only one that it wasn't either decided on a last-second shot or went to overtime. 85-73, Missouri wins. They get Florida tomorrow. Don't like that matchup for them. As much as I love Missouri, as much as I see them as the one dark horse in this tournament, the non-top 4 seed that I think has the best chance of winning this thing is Missouri because their diversity of ways to score. Also, another side note from tonight, I had this all in my notes. They move so damn well without the basketball. Caleb Grill is so good at moving without the basketball and creating a shot for himself just by getting open. Jacob Cruz, the same way. On the fast break, Tamar Bates is a really good cutter. Aiden Shaw cut well tonight. A lot of guys on Missouri move so well without the basketball that it makes them hard to guard. And when you have players like Mark Mitchell, when healthy, and Tony Perkins, who are great at putting the ball on the floor and getting past their man, you scramble a defense. And a lot of times tonight, Missouri scrambled Mississippi State's defense. So credit to them. Wild night. I got to wrap it up. I got to hit the hay. But it's thanks, as always, my friends over at Columbia Craft and Peak Drift both make fantastic beers. They're 2 brands that are powered together to create award-winning beer in the state of South Carolina. And they both make beers that I enjoy drinking right before I go to bed and to unwind from a very long day. It is a long day of basketball. We have another long day tomorrow. Again, the matchups. Ole Miss against Auburn, 1 o'clock. Texas against Tennessee. 25 minutes approximately after that ends. We'll see. Missouri and Florida, that's scheduled to tip off at 7 Eastern. And then Kentucky and Alabama. Right after that, we'll see when these games end. We'll see when they start. Because like we saw today, sometimes a double overtime game in the middle of the day can absolutely jack up the whole schedule and make it to where the other game isn't until the last game isn't until 1 a.m. on the East Coast. That's conference tournament season, baby. This is what it's all about. This is very exciting. Thanks again to Columbia Craft and Peak Drift for allowing me to be able to do this. This is loads of fun. I love the matchups tomorrow. Very excited to do this with you guys again. Thanks for Patrick Fisher. Shout out, buddy. As the only guy that's been able to watch live tonight. Everybody else is sleeping. Enjoy this when you wake up tomorrow or whenever you consume this content. An insane night. Shout out to Otega Oweh for hitting a big-time shot with less than a second left for Kentucky to beat Oklahoma. Shout out to Tamar Bates for getting 25 points, playing great defense, and for Tony Perkins for an all-around game from Missouri to beat Mississippi State. Final shout-out to Jordan Pope and Tremont Mark, the 2 non-Trey Johnson players who stepped up most when they needed it, and Caden Shedrick, who hit all 10 of his free throws in a win against Texas A&M and kept A&M's bigs off the glass in the first half. It gave them enough of a cushion that was able to get them to overtime. So shout out to those guys there. Final shout out of the night in SEC tournament play, Sean Padula, for having the stones to shoot that three and win the game despite missing your first 6 of the game. Because that one that you hit on attempt number 7 turned out to be pretty big, and it sent John Calipari and the Arkansas Razorbacks packing their bags. The backs packing bags. That is exactly what happened tonight. So we'll do this again tomorrow at the conclusion of all the games and press conferences. I'm Elijah Campbell. Thank you for joining me. Let's talk more hoop tomorrow. Can't wait to do it with you guys. Take it easy. Good night.